Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off your cozy sheets and dropping you right into the sandy sandals of someone who definitely didn't ask to be reincarnated in ancient Egypt. The sun's already high, the air is thick with the tang of sweat and roasted mud brick, and if you're wondering what that scratchy texture under your feet is, it's probably beetle husks. You're going to need some luck to survive even one day in this place. Spoiler, you probably won't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I always love seeing who's drifting off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of goat hooves on packed dirt and someone yelling in a dialect your modern brain doesn't remotely understand. You're lying on a woven reed mat, stiff as a drying fish, in a mud brick home that's already an oven. The Nile Delta sun doesn't care what century you're from, it just bakes everything evenly. Your linen tunic itches. That's because it's been washed maybe twice this month and sun-dried in a cloud of fine grit. There's no deodorant, no running water, and the bathroom is a clay pot in the corner that's been attracting a community of flies with doctoral-level persistence. You duck through the low doorway and step into the alley, barely missing a steaming pile of donkey droppings. You thought LA had rough streets? Welcome to Thebes. The air is a swampy mix of sweat, sewage, and date palms, almost sweet until it isn't. The streets pulse with life, vendors bark about onions and copper trinkets, goats weave through children chasing each other with fish bones, and someone's playing a flute that sounds suspiciously like a mosquito having an existential crisis. You're immediately put to work. No breakfast, no complaints. You're lowborn, remember? Maybe a brickmaker's apprentice or a temple laborer. The clock-in system here is a man with a stick who shouts if you're late. And if you're a woman, expect to haul water, grind grain. Or if you're unlucky, scrub communal latrines while chanting prayers to a goddess of sanitation who may or may not exist. One wrong turn near the canals, and you're knee-deep in Nile mud. And it's not just mud. The Nile is beautiful, yes, but it's also a thriving resort for crocodiles, parasites, and egrets with an attitude. Historians still argue whether bilharzia, a parasite that makes your bladder scream, was widespread or just underdiagnosed. But you've already got that telltale itch, and we both know you're not making it to sunset. By mid-morning, your back is slick with sweat. There's no shade unless you're a noble or a cat. Cats here, royalty. Step on one, and you could get executed. Accidentally anger a stray tabby? That's a felony-level offense. Ancient Egyptian society was weirdly obsessed with their feline friends. Quaint until you're literally sharing lunch with one who won't take no for an answer. Speaking of lunch, there isn't much. Maybe some coarse barley bread with a side of onion. No utensils, just hands, dust, and the hope you don't get sick. And don't drink the water unless you've built up a tolerance to things that squirm. People mostly drink beer. It's thick, cloudy, and tastes like fermented cereal milk. But hey, it's got calories and doesn't give you dysentery. Probably. As you haul bricks toward the towering, half-finished temple, a supervisor in a leopard skin sash barks something about speed. You move faster. The temple isn't even for your god. It's for Sobek or Hathor or some deity whose job is vaguely defined and extremely vengeful. You'd complain, but then you remember that ancient Egypt has no HR department. Only lashings and divine wrath. Around you, scribes take notes in neat hieroglyphs, recording how many bricks you moved, how many breaks you took, and how often you coughed like a heretic. Those scribes? They're the nerds with all the power. Literacy is rarer than good plumbing, and these guys know it. They've memorized prayers, tax codes, and 17 ways to say, "you're fined." You start to wonder about shade, but the sun here doesn't just shine, it scorches. You try using a head wrap for protection, but the linen just absorbs the sweat and turns into a personal sauna. There's talk among the other workers about crocodile dung being used as sunscreen. Yes, really. Quirky? Sure. Effective? Debatable. But you smear a little on just in case. You'll smell like a bog, but at least you'll die moisturized. Afternoon is when you start hallucinating. Was that a ibis or your Aunt Carol's face in a tree? Time becomes sludgy. You're seeing golden statues in the sand that definitely aren't real. Or maybe they are. Ancient Egypt blurs lines between hallucination and holiness faster than you can say Ra's wrath. As the sun begins to dip, you limp back toward your home. Your feet are raw, your mouth tastes like river salt and regret, and you might be developing a heat rash in places you can't politely describe. Back in your dusty room, a neighbor warns you about tomb raiders in the area. People have been disappearing, some for real treasure, others for just being in the wrong place. You're suddenly very aware of how not special you are. Nobody's coming to rescue you. There's no magic amulet, no Hollywood quick exit. just heat, sand, and the muffled croak of frogs echoing through the twilight. And if you were hoping to relax with some music or a bath, bad news. The music is your neighbor drumming on a pot lid, and the bath is a bucket you share with a family of 4 and occasionally a snake. You collapse on the mat again, dust clinging to every crevice, and wonder how anyone made it past puberty. And then you remember. Most didn't. Life expectancy for a laborer? Maybe 30. Give or take a plague. You wake with a start. It's not even dawn yet, and someone's already hammering outside. Or maybe it's just your temples. You sit up too fast and hit your head on a low wooden beam. The reed mat under you is damp with sweat or something more concerning, and your back feels like you spent the night wrestling limestone blocks. Which, well, you basically did. Breakfast. If you're lucky, there's some leftover porridge, a lumpy mix of barley and uncertainty. If you're really lucky, it's not infested with weevils, but honestly, you eat it anyway. Your standards are lower than the Nile floodplain in drought season. You step outside and the cool pre-dawn air lulls you into false hope. It won't last. Soon, the day will rise like a fire-breathing sphinx and roast you from every angle. But for now, there's a hush in the village. A few early risers shuffle past with baskets balanced on heads, and a priest chants near the temple, his voice a deep murmur of vows and incense smoke. You're summoned for a purification ritual. That sounds fancy, but it really just means you're about to fast, sit in silence, and maybe be whipped with palm fronds, all in the name of cleansing your impure self. Apparently you breathed too close to the statue of Thoth yesterday. Naughty. The ritual is long. The priests keep a straight face, but you can't help noticing that some of them smell faintly of beer and onions. Still, they're high status, untouchable. You can't even sneeze without consequences. One acolyte spills a bowl of scented oil and gets a cuff to the ear so hard his wig shifts sideways. The ancient world? Not big on workers' rights. By midday, you're dizzy with hunger and forced to join a public gathering for a minor harvest ceremony. There's drumming, clapping, and some enthusiastic dancing that would look suspiciously like a TikTok challenge if it weren't for the fact that everyone's barefoot and exhausted. You try to clap along, but your hands are shaking. A local kid giggles at your rhythm, possibly the only person in the crowd having a good time. Things take a turn when a noble's bodyguard eyes you for too long. You don't like his look, and you really don't like the way he murmurs to another guard and points. Next thing you know, you're being dragged to the side and interrogated for suspicious behavior. Apparently someone's been robbing tombs, again, and your foreign-looking face and general dazed expression make you a prime suspect. You're pressed against a stone wall while they ask questions you don't understand. You mumble something about barley and crocodiles, which, to be fair, is also how a lot of their actual crimes start. Eventually, a priest vouches for you. He vaguely remembers your terrible posture during morning rites, and you're released. But the mood has shifted. You're no longer just a tired worker. You're a tired worker under watch. And now you're thirsty. Not a little parched. Your tongue as dry as a linen rag. But that water jug near the square? It's communal, lukewarm, and has a strange film floating on top. Still, you drink. Because you have to. You choke a little on the first sip, and try to convince yourself the floating bits are herbal. As the afternoon burns on, you're roped into helping prepare grain offerings for the gods. You'd think this means cooking. It doesn't. It means standing in the sun, sorting barley by hand, while swatting flies and repeating chants to Hapi, the Nile god. A woman nearby insists Hapi appeared to her in a dream, promising rain and no more bad teeth. You nod politely. Her smile is mostly gums, so maybe that was more of a wish list than a prophecy. Historians still argue whether these religious dreams were taken literally or just part of a social script to keep spirits up. But one thing is certain, you don't question the gods aloud, not unless you want to be reassigned to crocodile latrine duty. Speaking of which, a man runs into the courtyard screaming about a crocodile taking his neighbor's dog. People murmur, some make signs of protection with their hands, and one elderly woman simply nods, as if this happens every Thursday. And honestly, it probably does. Sobek, the crocodile god, is considered sacred, which means killing a croc, even in self-defense, can lead to exile or worse. So the creatures roam freely near the canals, worshipped and feared. You try not to think about it while chewing your mid-afternoon meal, a cake of mashed dates and lentils half-baked on a hot rock. It tastes like sticky sadness, but again, you eat it anyway. Later, you wander near the scribe's school, trying to stay in the shade of the adobe walls. Inside, young boys chant the alphabet, scratching glyphs into shards of broken pottery. They'll grow up to become bureaucrats, record keepers, taxmen, the real backbone of Egyptian society. You feel a pang of envy. Literacy means power here. With the right symbols, they can command soldiers, assign rations, even fabricate entire mythologies. One wrong glyph, though, and you've just accidentally cursed a village. A young scribe in training spills his ink and gets swatted with a reed. You quietly back away. The late afternoon brings a breeze, and with it the smell of something burning. It's a ritual pyre, nothing dramatic, just some herbs and incense offered to ward off illness. The woman leading the rite hums a melody so gentle it actually soothes your sun-baked skull for a moment. Then someone hands you a hollowed gourd filled with beer. You hesitate. It's warm, frothy, and vaguely smells like bread left in the sun too long. But the locals drink it like lifeblood, and in a way it is. Water here is often contaminated, while beer is boiled, fermented, and far safer. Cloudy, nutrient-rich, and stronger than you expect. One gulp, and you understand why some folks are grinning through the heat. Another gulp, and you understand why some folks are missing teeth. You stagger slightly, full belly sloshing with yeasty cheer, and decide to follow the music toward the riverbank. There, families gather, singing, bathing, and letting the Nile cradle them like a muddy womb. You dip your feet in. It's warm, comforting, until something brushes your ankle and you remember that Crocs exist. You back away with the dignity of someone pretending they totally meant to leave early. Night comes on quickly. You help light a few oil lamps with a wick that keeps sputtering. Moths flit like sparks and shadows dance on the mud brick walls. You hear laughter somewhere, and a baby's cry, and the low murmur of someone telling a story about the stars being the souls of pharaohs. You look up. The sky here is immense, black velvet, glittering like ground quartz. You lie down again on your mat, more dust than skin at this point, and think, maybe tomorrow will be easier. Spoiler, it won't. The next morning your body aches like you've wrestled both raw and set in a sandstorm, but before you can groan your way into sitting upright, there's a knock at the door, or more accurately, a thump and a barked command. You're being summoned, not by your overseer, not by the temple, but by someone in the palace. Your stomach drops. That's never good news. You shuffle along the dusty path, guided by a guard with a shaved head and eyes that suggest he's seen things, like executions before breakfast. Your mind races. Did someone report you? Did that priest change his story? Or worse, did you step on a sacred scarab? Inside the palace gates, the air somehow feels heavier. Cooler, yes, but tense. The stone floors are polished, the walls lined with painted scenes of battles, ceremonies, and gods judging the souls of the dead. You walk past one image of a man being weighed against a feather and quietly hope they never weigh your heart. Not after that thing you said about Hathor's haircut yesterday. You're not alone in the chamber. Several other commoners are gathered, tired, confused, sunburned. A royal scribe steps forward with a scroll and clears his throat. By decree of Pharaoh, he begins, his voice nasal and proud. Labor shall be redirected to the new granary. All brickmakers, herders, and field workers shall report to the Delta storage region, effective immediately. You blink. That's far. Days of travel, no warning, no negotiation, just a command from someone you'll never meet. Welcome to Egypt, where the pharaoh's whim is your full-time job. The group disperses in silence, but tension ripples through the air. Someone mutters about walking into another famine zone. Another says his wife is pregnant. Someone else whispers, this is because the temple priests are hoarding grain again. You don't know who to believe. Historians still argue whether grain redistribution was a clever system or just an excuse for religious elites to play God with dinner. You return home to pack what little you have, which isn't much. Your tunic, a pot of salt, a dull blade, and a carved amulet of Bastet that someone swore would keep scorpions away. It hasn't worked yet. On your way out of the village, a tax collector stops you. Of course. He wears a smug expression and carries a tablet marked with tally lines. You owe, he says flatly. For what? He shrugs. Use of the canal, grain ration shortfall, breathing. You fork over what few copper rings you have, plus a bracelet made of cowrie shells that your neighbor insisted was lucky. The collector examines it with disdain, pockets it anyway, and waves you on. Somehow, getting robbed by the government feels worse than getting robbed by an actual thief. The journey toward the Delta is long, hot, and peppered with misfortune. You pass villages where people are coughing blood, where grain stores have turned moldy, where the only water is tinged green. You hear rumors, plagues in the north, collapsing granaries, even word that the Hyksos are raiding again. But who knows? News in Egypt travels slowly and arrives exaggerated. One stop along the road offers a communal shrine. A carved figure of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of war and healing, stands inside. You drop to your knees and whisper a clumsy prayer. You're not sure if it's for protection or forgiveness. Nearby, an old man explains how the stars can cure toothaches. Just sleep with your head pointing west, he says, so your soul can chat with Osiris while you dream. Is it superstition? Probably. But at this point, you'd believe in anything for a good night's rest and an uninfected molar. By the time you reach the delta, your feet are blistered and your nerves frayed. You're assigned to grain hauling duty. It's miserable, but at least it's not tomb digging. The granaries are massive, cool shadowy vaults with walls lined in reed mats and the unmistakable scent of old bread and rodent droppings. You learn to swing a basket of barley from hip to shoulder, fast enough to keep the foreman from yelling. You learn which rats to ignore and which ones to chase off, and you learn that the rich get the cleanest grain while the rest of it gets extra protein. At night, you sleep in a shared tent with 20 other workers, most of them coughing. One claims to have been cursed by a priest after mocking Anubis. You suspect it's just pneumonia. But just in case, you sleep facing away from him and whisper a half-hearted apology to the jackal god before drifting off. By the third day, you meet a young girl with tattooed arms, symbols of Isis inked into her skin. She laughs easily, sings while she works, and gives you a dried fig. You haven't tasted fruit in weeks. It's sweet, unexpected, and makes you homesick for a home you never had. Don't worry, she says. No one lasts long here. You either get transferred again, or married. She winks. You're not sure which sounds more terrifying, but the truth of her words hits you. Life in ancient Egypt isn't about thriving, it's about enduring. You're not part of some glorious golden age. You're a cog in a theocratic machine. You haul, you sweat, you pray, you're ignored by the gods. And yet, there's something calming about the rhythm. Morning chants, afternoon sweat, evening stories by torchlight. You're not alone in your suffering, and there's a weird kind of peace in that. One evening, while staring at the stars and listening to the Nile's lullaby in the distance, a question floats into your mind. Could you survive this? Maybe, if you're lucky, if you're invisible, if you never speak too loudly, never step on a sacred insect, never fall in love with the wrong priest's daughter. But one bad harvest, one cracked jar, one whispered rumor, and it's over. And still, someone nearby is laughing, telling a joke about a pharaoh's wig blowing off in the wind. Even here, in the dust, under the weight of gods and grain, there is room for a smile. And maybe that's the most human part of this whole ancient ordeal. He wine rustles gently through the reeds now, like the breath of old gods sighing into the night. Your body is heavy, gritty with sand, but strangely relaxed, almost floating inside its own stillness. The Nile hums low in the background, cradling the world in ancient rhythm, unchanging even as empires rise and fall like grain slipping through a hand. The torches burn low, someone sings a lullaby in a language half lost to time, and it sounds familiar, like something you've always known but never quite heard. The stars wheel silently above you, the same ones Egyptians once traced in oil lamps and painted on tomb ceilings, dreaming of eternity. You're safe now, at least for tonight. The gods are watching, but they're quiet. The scribes have put down their styluses, the priests their incense bowls. Even the crocodiles are asleep. Your breath slows. You no longer feel the ache in your shoulders, the sting of blisters, the taste of sand on your lips. Just the dark warmth of night, the scent of pressed herbs and dust, the echo of chants drifting across the delta. Let your thoughts drift, unhurried and light. Let them sink into the ancient soil, where they'll be held in hush like secrets too old to tell. Tomorrow can wait. Tonight, you rest.